Joining me now is Max Stier, President and CEO of Partnership for Public Service. Max, yours is a nonpartisan group that focuses on government service.
Yes, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization.
Right.
Better government and stronger democracy is our motto.
And tell me first, what would be the impact of Schedule F if it is instituted?
So we would lose an incredible asset for the American people, which is the very best civil servants that are solving all kinds of problems in a very, very dangerous world. Our government is based on the notion that civil servants are there to follow the policy lead of the political appointees, but ultimately that their loyalty is to the rule of law and the Constitution of the United States, and that would be put at jeopardy.
Well, how do you answer Donald Trump's concerns about, quote, the deep state?
So I think that there's no question that we need a government of civil servants that are responsive to the elected leaders, and in this instance, President-elect Donald Trump. But the reality is that we live in a system of laws and of a constitution, and we don't have a king. And that's why the system was designed in the way it was. The last time we had a system that really was defined by something like Schedule F, where civil servants are there at will to the political appointees, was when we had the spoils system of the 19th century. So I think the immediate response to President-elect Trump is that if he wants more responsive civil servants, he can get that. He can modernize our government. But what is being proposed today would blow it up, and it would hurt not just his administration, but it would hurt all of America.
This would include experts in agriculture, experts at the FDA, people in the State Department who understand
Absolutely.
the intricacies of the visa process.
Absolutely.
Or other policies.
It is a complex world with many, many challenges. It's dangerous. You want expert people who are able to provide good advice, good facts to the decision makers that are ultimately the political appointees. And so really actually strengthening the system, ensuring that you have better talent that is still apolitical and expert is what we should be driving towards. What we're talking about with Schedule F, and it does not only have to be Schedule F, there are many other ways you could undermine the civil service, would give us the opposite of what is in fact desired. You would have less responsive government, you would have worse government, you would have government that would be rife with cronyism, with corruption, and with incompetence. I don't think any of us should want that, and the policy choices around the way we structure our government that are proposed right now would lead in the wrong direction, not the right one.
I'm told by my sources that people in the CIA feel particularly vulnerable to this.
Absolutely. I think it's true, though, in the intelligence community. It's true at the Department of Justice. It's true across the government. The reality is civil servants are there in order to serve the public. They want to do their very best by the public. We are in a democracy. That means that when we have an election like we just had, we get new leaders who get to decide what direction the government goes in. But the concept of a government for the people rather than for a personal private agenda is fundamental to, I think, the DNA of all civil servants. They want to serve the political appointees within the constraints of the law and the Constitution.
And what concerns would you have about business investments overseas and elsewhere?
Well, I think
by some of the people. I mean, the whole issue of Elon Musk being a White House advisor with one of the biggest contractors in government, but also people who are investing in real estate projects overseas.
So I think what you're describing is a through line through all these issues. When you look at individuals who are coming into government, they're supposed to clear their potential financial conflicts so that they're looking out, again, for the public and not their own private interests. That's the way we've always run government for at least the last 140 years, and it's what it should be. If you see somebody like an Elon Musk who obviously has vast private sector interests, you need to ensure that whatever engagement he has with public sector decisions creates a wall and distance between those private interests and those public concerns.
This would include some of the potential nominees for Treasury, for Securities and Exchange Commission. All these agencies, these regulatory agencies, would really be.
Absolutely. It's not just the career civil service. We need to make sure that the political appointees are also there. They swear actually the same oath of service as the career civil servants, and that's what we need.